Prime Minister, given your very public stance against tax avoidance, all these disclosures about Blairmore, the investment fund set up by your late father, set up in a way in Panama and the Bahamas with the express purpose for that company not to pay tax, is that embarrassing for you?
Well, obviously it's been a difficult few days, reading criticisms of my father and his business practices. I mean, my dad, a man I love and admire and miss every day. And I think a lot of the criticisms are based on a fundamental misconception, which is that Blairmore Investment, a unit trust, was set up with the idea of avoiding tax. It wasn't. It was set up after exchange controls went, so that people who wanted to invest in dollar-denominated shares and companies could do so. And there are thousands of other unit trusts set up in this way. It was reported to the HMRC, the Inland Revenue. It reported itself every year. It was properly audited. It wasn't a family trust. It wasn't for the benefit of one particular family. Anyone could have bought units in it. And crucially, if you were a UK citizen and bought units in it, then you paid income tax on the dividends and you paid corporate capital gains tax when you sold the shares. So you're subject to full UK taxation. So that's what it was. There are many other unit trusts like it, and I think it's being unfairly described, and my father's name is being unfairly written about. But look, I'm very clear about my situation, happy to answer questions about it, and above all, I'm going to go on fighting very hard to make sure we have greater transparency, greater rules on tax avoidance and aggressive tax evasion and aggressive tax avoidance. It's very important that we do.
Yes, I completely understand that it was set up at a time when lots of funds were set up because of the abolition of exchange controls. But the effect of the structure meant that the fund didn't pay tax. Is that wrong?
Well, the point is it was a unit trust, so the money it had was other people's money on which they paid tax. If you were a United Kingdom owner of these things, you paid income tax on your dividends and you paid tax in the normal way. If you were a foreigner, you'd pay tax in your own country. That's why these things, there are thousands of unit trusts and there are millions of people who own shares in Britain, many of whom hold them through unit trusts. And as I say, it was licensed by the Inland Revenue and reported to it every year. Now, I've been very clear about the future. I've said I'm not going to benefit from any family trusts. I've been very clear about the present. I don't own any shares. I don't own any unit trusts or any investments like that. I own a home I own two homes, one of which I rent out, and I have a salary as Prime Minister, so my affairs are very transparent, happy to make them more transparent. But I should deal with the past as well, because of course I did own stocks and shares in the past, quite naturally, as my father was a stockbroker. I sold them all in 2010 because I wanted, if I was going to become Prime Minister, I don't want anyone to say you've got other agendas or vested interests or all the rest of it. And I did. Samantha and I had a joint account and we owned 5,000 units in Blairmore Investment Trust, which we sold in January 2010. That was worth something like £30,000.
Was there a profit on it?
I paid income tax on the dividends, but there was a profit on it, but it was less than the capital gains tax allowance, so I didn't pay capital gains tax, but it was subject to all the UK taxes in all the normal ways. So I want to be as clear as I can about the past, about the present, about the future, because frankly, I don't have anything to hide. I'm proud of my dad and what he did and the business he established and all the rest of it. I can't bear to see his name being dragged through the mud, as you can see. And for my own, I chose to take a different path from my father, grandfather and great-grandfather, who were all stockbrokers, and I've got nothing to hide in my arrangements, and I'm very happy to answer questions.
So I'm sorry to press you on this, but part of your dad's estate was in Jersey when he died. Did you benefit from that?
No, he left me some money, very generously, quite a lot of money, and I've been able to...
Can you tell us how much?
I think it was published at the time. It was £300,000. It was published at the time, as these things are. I obviously can't, point to every source of every bit of the money, and Dad's not around for me to ask the questions now. But he was a very hard-working man. He built up a business. He left his house to my brother. He left me some money and left things to my brothers and sisters too. And I think there's pretty good transparency about all of that. And as I've said, in the future, I'm not benefiting from any Cameron family trusts. At the moment, I own no shares, no investments. I have savings. I'm very happy if people, I've said this before, if people want to see public information about tax returns, what goes on your tax return, I can tell you what's on mine. And I've said before the last election, happy to, if we want to move to this situation where prime ministers and potential prime ministers publish this information, I'm very happy to do that. So I hope I've dealt with the future, the present and the past, being frankly more transparent about these sorts of things than I think any prime minister has in the past.
But therefore, actually, you can't be certain that some of that 300,000 didn't come from offshore sources, presumably.
Well, he had investments in Blairmore Investment Trust.
And money in Jersey.
That was because of another unit trust, again, established to industry standard and all the rest of it. And many people have those investments. But in all of this, I've never hidden the fact that I'm a very lucky person. I had wealthy parents who gave me a great upbringing, who paid for me to go to an amazing school. I've never tried to pretend to be anything I'm not. And I'm lucky that I've earned a good salary as Prime Minister. My wife is successful and earns money, and we own 2 very nice houses. So I'm not pretending anything other than that. But I was keen in 2010 to sell everything, shares and all the rest of it, so I can be very transparent. I don't own any part of any company or any investment trust or anything else like that.
There was a time when you talked about being completely transparent, publishing everything on an annual basis in terms of assets and income and all the rest of that. Do you think, are you going to revisit that? Do you think senior politicians should be completely transparent about their earnings and assets?
I think the idea of, as I said before the last section, the idea of publishing the information that goes in your tax return, I'm very relaxed about that. It didn't happen before the last election. I think, it didn't come about. But if that's what, I don't think this should be for every MP. I think it's a very big change in our system.
But party leaders? But you think party leaders?
I think people, Prime Minister, potential Prime Minister,
yeah.
I'm very happy for that to happen.
Of course, it won't be you next time.
Well, no, I'm happy to get on and do that now. Whether we do it every year or starting now or going back a couple of years, whatever. I'm very happy with that. And that would be a big change, so we shouldn't dive into it and suddenly insist everyone has to do it. But I think if people really want Prime Minister, potential Prime Minister, as I said before, I'm relaxed about that, and I'm happy to do that.
Now, you've also been here talking about your passion for us to stay in the European Union. Your big message was you wanted young people to vote. You've sort of implied it matters rather more to young people than to older people. Do you regret not allowing 16-year-olds to vote?
Well, that was a decision for Parliament. Parliament voted. I think 18 is the right age, personally. I've always voted for 18. And that's the decision Parliament took. And I think we had several goes at it. Look, I think young people have the most to gain from staying in a reformed Europe because of the opportunities to work, to travel, to study, the opportunities of a single market of 500 million people stretching across our continent. But I think also they have the most to lose. If we were to leave and there was an economic shock, our economy suffered, prices went up, unemployment increased, growth went down, or we had, as the Bank of England have said, we might have a temporary recession. And young people get affected by that the most, and we know that from our past. Also, if you have 7 to 10 years of uncertainty as we're trying to work out what is our trading relationship with Europe, what is Britain's trading relationships with other countries of the world, those young people I was talking to today at Exeter University, the start of their working life is going to be mired in uncertainty. Don't take that risk. Don't take that step into the dark. Instead, let's vote to stay in a reformed European Union.
One of the students did say that she thought, though, that your decision to spend taxpayers' money, £9.3 million, in arguing the case through this distribution of leaflets, a social media campaign. She thought that was undemocratic. Isn't she right?
I don't agree with that. We have very clear rules for what happens in the campaign. So the 28 days, there's £7 million for both the out campaign and the in campaign to spend and all the rest of it. But I absolutely defend not just the legality, but the rightness of the government publishing very clearly so everyone can see what our opinion is. So many people I meet say we want more information, we want more facts, we want to know the arguments. I don't want anyone in this country to go to the polls on June the 23rd without knowing that the government's very clear view is that we are better off in, we're safer in, we're stronger in. This is the right decision for Britain's families, for Britain's jobs, for the future of our country. People thirst for that information, and I don't want anyone on June the 24th to say, well, I didn't know that the government thought this was a bad idea. Because let's be clear, the government does have a clear view. Yes, some cabinet ministers in a personal capacity are campaigning on the other side, but the government has a clear collective view we are better off in, that it would be a bad decision to vote to leave. And I think it's right to make sure the British people understand that.
Now, I've been in Exeter talking to people about both Europe and this tax issue. What they've said to me is actually what people always say to me on this, that they think people should pay the taxes that are the due of most individuals. They sort of see that, you know, people often say to me is that paying the tax that you owe is a moral issue. Is it a moral issue in your view?
Yes, absolutely. We should, we should pay the taxes that we owe. And also, I've said very clearly, there's not only the rules, and the rules on these things are changing on investments and all the rest of it. Some of the changes brought in by my government. We've done more than any previous government to crack down on aggressive tax avoidance, on abuses. I think we've raised an extra £12 billion by doing that. But there's the rules, and there's also making sure that you're content with the choices that you make. And I think both of those things are important. And frankly, the rules in these sorts of areas have changed. The culture is changing too, and I think that's a good thing.
Do you feel any personal conflict of interest, though? It's the way your father behaved, frankly, was very typical of stockbrokers of his generation. But standards have changed.
Well, rules have changed and culture's changed. And as I say, I welcome that. But, if you look at today, one of the leading tax lawyers in our country, Graham Aronson, is very clear that unit trusts like Blairmore were set up, and he says, and it would be completely wrong to say they were set up as vehicles for tax avoidance. They were set up because the world had changed, exchange controls had come off. It was possible to set up organizations where people who wanted to buy dollar-denominated companies and shares and stocks from right around the world could do that. And these unit trusts, of which there are still thousands in our country, were properly audited and looked at by Revenue and Customs, and that's as it should be. But if you're asking, do rules need to change more? Do customs and practices need to change more? Absolutely, this government's been right behind that. We're getting country after country to share tax information so people can't hide their tax details. We're the first country in the world to have a register of beneficial ownership so everyone can see who owns what company. We're taking huge amounts of action, and we'll be announcing more of this at our anti-corruption summit in May, to make sure that particularly London doesn't become a home for hot money. So we're committed to taking all of these steps.
Prime Minister, many thanks.
Thank you.